My name is David Scott. I'm a professor at Uniformed Services University in Bethesda, Maryland at Walter Reed National Medical Center. I live in Bethesda, Maryland. The first AAI meeting I presented at was probably, I'm guessing, 1969 or so. I was a graduate student in Marksman's lab, and at that time there were no posters, so everybody whose abstract was accepted got to present, give a 10-minute talk. And as a young kid from New Jersey doing his first presentation at a national meeting, I think this was Atlantic City when we had meetings there, I gave my talk, and immediately after my talk, which was on the induction of tolerance in vitro, 3 people lined up at the microphone: Jeanette Thorbecke, Baruch Benaceref, and I think Frank Dixon. 3 big heavyweights in immunology, and I guess I can't say it on camera, but let's just say my pants were a little bit wet at that time, and they asked me some good questions, and fortunately I was able to answer them. But I remember distinctly seeing these people walk up to the microphone and going, The person who had the greatest influence in my career was primarily Byron Waxman, who was the president of AAI. He was a professor at Yale and chairman of the department. And actually, when I first met him, it was at an AAI meeting, and I had been at the University of Chicago as a graduate student and ran into him in an elevator and saw his badge, said Yale, happened to have a girlfriend on the East Coast at that time, and so I introduced myself and said, gee, Waxman, I worked at the Waxman Institute for Microbiology. And he looked at me, anyone who knows Byron, he says, that was my father. So that was the grand start to our initiation, and he was a phenomenal mentor. He was an absolutely brilliant person, a true scholar in every aspect of it, and he taught me just about everything I know in immunology, and also everything I knew about mentoring and training and doing research. And I will say one other thing about Byron. Last year at this meeting, a little bit of a sad anecdote is that Byron passed away about a year ago in June. And at this meeting, some of the people at AAI were trying to contact him to interview former presidents of AAI. At that time, I pursued trying to contact him and eventually found out that he was in an assisted living facility near Boston. I happened to be at a meeting the next month and went up to see him, and he was actually in a hospital bed, not doing very well. And I got a chance to see him. It was actually very emotional. I'll probably get a little choked up just talking about it because I shook his hand, thanked him, and I realized it was near the end of his life. I kind of broke down and couldn't talk to him anymore, and he died 2 days later. So it was very emotional for me. But he was, like many people felt, he was like a father to me too. The best advice I can give to a young scientist seeking a career in this field is to make sure you've got a fire in your belly and have a passion for what you're doing and absolutely love doing research. And not to be fixed on just an academic career, but just being a good scientist. Because being in academics has its advantages, but there's so many job opportunities. So keep a broad view of what your opportunities are. Know that if you're well trained as a scientist, you could be a fantastic college or high school teacher. You could go into public affairs. You could go into editing. You could go to biotech or pharma. And obviously, you can still go into academics. But what you're going to need is a fire in your belly. The second thing I think I'd say is make sure you've got a little bit of a strong skin, because you're going to be criticized. Everything you do is going to be criticized. Your grants will be criticized. Your papers will be criticized. Your colleagues will criticize you. That's positive for your benefit. So you need to just be able to deal with it. And I will like to take one little anecdote. I did some work in science education, and I should add that one of my proudest achievements in starting the AAI Immunology course. I forgot to say that, and being involved in science education. So I got to meet Bruce Alberts, who's been a pioneer in science education. And when we're visiting a middle school in San Francisco, I think in the Mission District, which is not a wealthy area, there are a bunch of kids showing what they'd learned using some of the tools that UCSF people had given them through their science education partnership. And a little girl was coming up to show all the scientists visiting how she had learned about specific gravity and density. And they had different colored liquids, and she put them into a straw and tried to layer them. And the straw was in like a potato, because they didn't have the equipment, so I just took a straw and potato. She had all this stuff, and she was so proud the way it was colored, things were labeled, layered. She ran towards us, and she tripped, and the thing goes splat on the floor, and all of us go, oh my God. And we probably thought, oh, she's going to cry. She went, guess I have to go do it again. She runs back to the table, and we said, that's a future scientist. That's a future scientist. And that's probably the best thing I can say. Have that fire in your belly and keep plugging away.